materials in general in hydrologic sense, and also the graphical techniques that are really readily accessible to drawing them. So here's a hydrogeologic conceptual model that I drew for the Piedmont. We'll talk about this later in the class. This is a cross-section of a hillside and a stream. And in the Piedmont, the rock is fractured crystalline rock. So this is meant to depict that. Here are the fractures. And then overlying the fractured crystalline rock is light shown in yellow. Here's the water table, and the flow is shown here just very idealized with vertical flow down through the vadose, and then once it hits the water table, the flow lines curve over to the stream. So what I'm doing here, trying to show the flow system as continuous flow vectors or flow lines, and showing how it goes through actually much of the flow is going through the transition between the fractured rock and the saprolite. It's better for many applications to show the flow system as continuous flow lines rather than just flow vectors, to get a better picture of what the flow is doing. I also have in here some wells just to show the relative heads that may be needed for conceptual model. It really depends on just the details of what you want to show. Certainly it's okay many of you would want to include wells, I think, in your conceptual model if the use of the aquifer is important. If the is sort of putting the system are, you might want to include it. So here's an example. This was drawn using the drawing techniques that are built into PowerPoint. Microsoft Word has similar drawing capabilities. PowerPoint is a bit better. Now, there are software packages out there for doing drawing. I would stay away from paint programs. You want to use a vector drawing program like this one. The paint does just a pixel by pixel manipulation, and it just doesn't. You can't draw these straight lines as crisply, or the curved lines here, I guess in particular, look peculiar in paint. So I would use a vector-based graphic pack. And this is done by drawing out each one of the elements. If I so I'll show you how to do this in just a second. You can see that there are these arrows that are drawn. There are some regions that are filled with here. You see the transparency, and so I'll show you some of the techniques that I use to make this in just a second. But let me also show you another example of a conceptual model, and this one is of a mine and the hydrogeology around a mine in South Dakota, and this is the cross section of the mine here. So cross section of the mine here, this is a kilometer for scale, that's the Empire State Building. So it's a pretty big place, and there are a lot of mine workings, and here's what it looks like in plan view. So what I wanted to show was that there was this region where lots of workings. There are actually like 500 kilometers of tunnels in this place. So there's this region that looks kind of like this, and in plan view it's kind of long and thin. And so it was way too complicated to represent all of these tunnels. So I just wanted to represent the region of where these tunnels occur. And this progressed with depth, so the mining started up here and went down to depth, and then it filled up with water over about 6 years, and then that water was starting to be pumped out. And as it turns out, it hasn't really been pumped out completely like it's shown there. But through the course of doing this work, I wanted to have a conceptual model of this mine. And so I said, well, that's going to be the region of the mine. And so I made it even simpler shape here in this conceptual model. So this is the region that all those workings are in. And it's dipping, it's plunging down like so. And there's an open pit that's shown right there. And the basic conceptual model is a shallow flow system shown here just in a very schematic way, where you can see the stream networks and the mountains between them, and then this local flow system that's discharging to the stream. And then up here at the very tops of the ridges between around the divide, there are a few flow lines that go down to this deeper line, and then there are pumps down here. So there's actually a water table here down at the bottom of the line, and so it's behaving like a big well, and it gets pumped out. So flow coming from the ground surface down to the mine, and here, out in the rock here, this is shown with these are different arrows, different symbols. These dashed lines are used to depict that the water is coming out of storage. So we don't have a flow system. It's bringing water down from the ground surface down here. Water was in storage, and perhaps it was moving a bit, but it was essentially immobile at the time the mine started. And then because of dewatering and the pressure drop from dewatering came out of storage. So that's what that's trying to go. And there's a pressure stress dependence on the aperture of the fractures, so that was important. And I showed it over here with this little graphic where the stress is increasing with depth, and that pinches the fracture closed with depth. That causes the hydraulic activity to be depth dependent. And a variety of issues here. The flow system, there are this shallow flow system here, this deep flow system that was recharged, and the deep storage, deep flow system that came from storage. These other issues, mining and flooding and deformation, were all important issues, so they were included here. As a front is kind of a text block here in this conceptual model. Okay, so that's another example. And actually, here's the depiction of the dipping metamorphic rock. It's the country rock in this place. It has deeply dipping foliated rock. Okay, so that's some examples of these conceptual models. And let me show you how to draw something like this using the PowerPoint. This is a perspective drawing. It has this kind of 3D effect and looks kind of 3D. And so here's another example of that with some of the construction lines drawn in. This one needs to get cleaned up a little bit. Some of the lines are not are kind of overlapping here. But this has somewhat of a 3D effect with the little river valley here, and this looks like the water table. And so this was just drawn from scratch in PowerPoint. And so let me show you how to do it. This 3D perspective block is something that you may be able to get a 3D perspective block generated in the software. Some software will do that, but it's fairly straightforward to just draw it yourself. So let me show you how to go about doing something like that. We're going to have to get out of the presentation mode of PowerPoint and get into the editing mode. And so let's just do this basic perspective block. Okay, so let's get rid of this stuff. And so we'll start with right here, this thing here, these shapes. It's really going to be your primary source of graphic tools. So we'll draw a rectangle here in the front of this. It'll be out of this block. And the trick to draw these three-dimensional perspectives is to put in what's called a vanishing point. So we'll put the vanishing point out here. And you can see up here that there's a vanishing point there. And basically, the way it's going to work is all the lines that are perpendicular to this face are going to go and point towards that vanishing point. And so you can draw them into this. And these are lines that won't be preserved in our final drawing. These are really just for construction. And so because of that, I'll just draw so. Basically, I'm going to have lines go from each corner back to the vanishing point. Okay, so that's those are my construction lines for now. In the back of the block, the vertical lines will be parallel, so this line will be vertical. And we'll have another line there. I'm just using the how lines are kind of the pixel step to see whether in fact that line is really horizontal. That looks pretty good. Okay, so that's really going to be construction line 2. All these I'll just end up deleting, but now draw a line that I could, or a surface that I could use. I'm going to use this thing here, this, I guess it's for drawing polygons. So we'll just draw a polygon here along these corner points. Get it quite right, that's okay, because we can go back and edit the locations of these points. So go around, go back to where you start, and double click. So there it is. And what we might want to do at this point is, if I right click and go down here to format shape, then I can go here to solid and fill that shape. Just I can see it better that way. Okay, and then I'll do the same thing over here on the right side. Okay, so there's the right side of the block, and we'll fill that. We've got the wrong things. There it is. Okay, so fill that with that shape. And can go here and edit what that block is getting filled with. So the easiest thing is to change the color. And so I can pick these colors. I've got a palette here from, but I also have down here more colors. You can blend your own color. You can pick from many standard colors. So there's a wide variety of colors that you can pick from. Okay, so that's not really overlapping just quite right. So let's take a quick look at how we might edit that. I'll zoom in just so we can see it a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to left click and select it, and I'm going to right click and go to edit points. Okay, now there's a little black square that's the point. I'm going to left click on that, and then I can round. And it's moving pretty smoothly. So one thing that you want to check, if you're editing this and it's jumping around, then sometimes what you have is that you have a feature that's turned on that causes there's a background grid, and it might be jumping and going to this grid. So if you go to drawing tools and go line down here, you can go to these grid setting, and this may be, I think this is turned on as the default. Snap objects to grid. So let's see what that does. Go here and try to edit now. Edit points again. No, it gets to land. So I'll grab that point, and now the way it works, it's snapping to either that point or that point, and not anywhere in between. So it can be really helpful if you want to have objects lined up, but if you want to try to draw them in free mode, then it's a pain in the butt because you can't get it to be just exactly where it is. So you may want to go and undo that. Another thing you can do, though, if you go and if you double right click on this thing, like so, oops, I'll go back, select it, click, go to edit points, and now I'm left clicking and I'm double clicking on it to select it. And now by double clicking on it, now even that snap grid is on, you can move it smoothly. So that's a handy thing, because having it snap the grid when you don't want to is really kind of an annoying thing. Okay, so it looks like through the course of that, I've moved this around a little bit more than I wanted to, so I'm going to have to move these points on this polygon, edit it a little bit. Looks like I still have to do this one down here. Okay, so there's our block, and now if we zoom out, we can take a look at this thing, and this will have a 3D perspective look to it. look like the start of a 3D picture. And I can then go and erase these lines. But I'm probably going to wait and do that later because I may want to draw in some other features and that I would want to use these lines. Or I may mess up something here and want to have them in there for a construction. So I'm going to just keep them in there now. So let's go ahead and put in a layer. Say a bed we can represent just a rectangle layer here. So there's a bed. And I'm going to zoom in. Okay. And so I want this to be a sand layer. Well, there are a couple options. And the details options. Okay, so here's one thing. I want this to line up just right on the edge of my block, but I turned on that snap to grid, and because I didn't have it on earlier when I drew these blocks, I'm not going to snap to grid and get it to line up right. What I should have done is had that snap grid on initially, and then when I drew this block here, I would have snapped to the grid initially, and this one would snap, things would be lined up. But I didn't do that. So here's what I'm going to do. I can get this whole thing to snap to the grid. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to turn off that grid. Snap. So it's back here under a line. So now I should be able to drag it over. Yeah, like so. Alright, and so I want to show up as a sand layer, and there are a couple of options. If I format and go to solid fill, then I can make it a variety of different colors like I showed you. So maybe that would be sufficient. Maybe if I just change the color, something that I want to use to represent sand, then that's going to be good enough. Now, another possibility is if I go to picture here, then as it turns out, for the version of PowerPoint that I have, there's a picture right there of some sand. So go and put in a picture of sand. Now that's okay, but it's busy, and what you often see on maps or cross sections is that they use a stippled pattern for sand, stippled pattern of dots, or dashes for clay. Now, it used to be back in the good old days that PowerPoint had a fairly nice set of graphical textures that you could put in that were just like line drawings, so stipples or dashes. And then they made so that that's no longer available, and it's not available in the version of PowerPoint that I have that I'm showing you. But in the new version of PowerPoint, it's back. So if you have access to either an old version or a current version of PowerPoint, then you'll notice that in this selection, this place right here in the middle, that there is a texture, I believe it's called texture, that has line drawings, black and white or whatever color you want, combination of colors, but they're just line drawings of stipples or dots or dashes, and they even have a symbol that looks like brick that is the symbol that's used for limestone. So that is really going to be a good resource if you have access to a palette of different textures. It turns out in this version I can't show you that, but hopefully you do. Another possibility, this isn't as good as the one that it's not as good as having the built-in textures, but one thing you can do is to let's see, clip art. Clip art has a lot of different things that you probably don't have much use for, but if you wanted a picture of a cow, there it is. So you can peruse this if you have access to it. And up top here, there are various things that you might have some use for, but probably not too much for technical things. But you can make a pattern of dots by going down here, selecting one of these dots, hit OK, and then it allows you to take that picture. So the dot shows up like this for some reason. Don't know why that is, but you tile the picture. Tile means that it's repeating. And there it is, and so that kind of looks like some sand, but if we make it smaller, so I made it just percent and 5%. That's too much. So make it about 20% in this direction. It looks like that might work. Okay. So there's one possibility for some sand. Now we want to have it wrap around this side too. So let's take a look at how to do that. I'm going to go and zoom out. Okay, so I'm going to put in two more of these guidelines. And these will be lines that I use to draw the 3D part of the layer. So that looks about right. Now I think I'll zoom back in just so I can see it a little bit better. And so we'll draw in now a polygon over that shape. Okay. So that guy, how it's curved, that is, obviously that's not what we want, but let me show you what we can do with that. If we go to points, these points can be manipulated in various ways. If we create a polygon, the default, at least in most cases, we would have had a polygon sharp edge created by default, and I'm not quite sure I did that, but that's fine. this is, you can also draw polygons, or you can also draw shapes that have curves at these points. What's happening here? So this that I drew right here has this curve that goes to it. It's a spline curve, and this line this is an editing feature, and so I can manipulate the line by using this. I can manipulate the line that I drew by changing these construction points. So I can turn this into a sharp angle like that, and I'll move the point to the right location, and this point, construction point here. Yeah, so I'll put that so it's going along the line, and then right here, this guy, let's get that selected. Okay. So there I've been able to get the corner effect back that I wanted, and so that's good. And let's go and fill this. So we just go to Format Shape and use a solid fill, and we'll use that. I'm sorry, the picture. The default is just to use the same picture that we had last. So and it's by default it's transparent background, so you see this brown showing through a bit. And so that's enough of that. And if we zoom back out, we can let's put in a stream here. And so I usually draw with this guy, Freeform. If you want to draw a curve, then this will well, let's try this one. This will automatically make it spline like we just saw. So I'm going to draw kind of a meandering stream, and it automatically does this spline like that. So that can be useful. And let's make it into a river. So if it's a river and it's going to show up, we want it to be pretty thick. So I'll go here into thickness, and maybe something like that. And the color, actually that's kind of a good color for a river, so we'll just leave it like that. Now, an alternative, this right here allows you to draw curves in a much more detailed way. This one, it's like a pen, you just go and hold it down, so hold the mouse button down and draw this in. And so it allows you to draw in, and let's see, if we go and right click on this guy, right click on that, you'll see that there are a bunch of points on this one. Okay, so that allows you to draw in much more detailed lines. What I find is it's hard to get those lines to look good, so I don't really ever use that. And most of the time, the way I draw stuff is with this freeform. And so if I put in another river here, the freeform, when it first goes in, is by default it's got these wrinkles to it. And so if I right click and go to edit this guy using Format Shape, I'm going to first make it thicker. And maybe we'll select it, right click, and go to edit points. And now if I select that point and right click on that point, you see I get those lines. And I go to smooth point, then give me this effect. So now it's no longer this right angle, but it's a spline, and I can manipulate it around by pulling this construction line around. So I can make it a smooth point, and right click on it again, and a corner point, and various effects. So just try experimenting around with these. They'll give you various different options. Okay, so other thing that's important to recognize is the ability to move. Well, basically we've got these different graphic elements, and one on basically they're one on top of the other, and the order that they appear in makes a difference. I mean, for example, if we were to, this is actually looking for this side, but if we were to do some editing, and it may be that we would have this. So what I did was to bring this brown side to the front, and so if I click and pull it off, see there's that one that we just drew underneath it, but they're in these different orders, okay? And so in order to get things to look right, you often will have to adjust the order, and you do that by going to right click and either send to back or to front. So that can be an important thing. Now, so let me see how it's when I put this back, I didn't quite get it right. So what I'm going to just use the arrow keys, and if I use the arrow keys, it allows me to move it with fairly small amounts. So I move it this way with the arrow keys, and have fairly good control on what I'm doing. Okay, so let's see. We might also then want to draw in some water flow, and so a flow line might look like. So this is pretty flat terrain, but let's say we're in Kansas, and got a flow line. Looks like that. There's the flow line. It looks kind of blocky, but I can right click and format shape, and probably want to put an arrow at the end of this to show that something going in this direction. So select the arrowhead, a variety to pick from. I can also select the size of the arrowhead. That would be then a big one, big arrow. And so, yeah, probably make the lines a bit thicker. You can, vary the line thicknesses if you want to make a point about whether it's a fast path or a slow path. Maybe you would change the line thickness. You might want to change the type line, and so we can make the line dash here. So, or possibly some other thing dotted. You might have noticed that there were fractures in the conceptual model that I showed you earlier, and they were done using this thing, double line. So that might be something that would be useful. I thought it was pretty nice for fractures. For a flow line, I don't think it's really what we want. But we might want to have it be dashed for some reason, and we would just go to edit points and probably make these curved a bit. So we would just use a smooth point, and probably want to smooth out that one too. Okay. So there's some smooth, and let's say just for example that we have um, another. Well, actually, so one thing that we might do is, yeah. So let's just put in another layer. And I'll just use a color fill for this guy. The way it works is that the order that you draw it in is the order of the display in terms of what's in front of what, until you go and change that. This new one that I'm drawing is going to be put in front of the one that I just drew previously, and so have a situation like so. And so what we would want to do is go here and select this layer, or select this arrow, and this would be a case where we'd want to go and use a bring front. There's the arrow. It's now on top of that stratigraphic layer. So those are some different options. If we go back to this slide that we were looking at previously, you can now see how I did much of this. What I did to do the photography here is I just drew some lines, came up. This was the top that I drew initially. And so I just drew some lines that came up and went over here as the topography, and then came down and kind of redrew the sides. And then this piece right here, that's the ground surface, is a piece that I just drew it out, and then when I filled it, I used a different kind of fill here. Right click and sort of form shape. And this is a gradient fill. So what I did here was to use two different color greens, a dark green and a light green. So, and then there's a gradient in them. So you kind of light down here and darker down here. That's done with this gradient fill. And there's one color here under stop 1, and then if I go to stop 2, you can see that's the lighter green is in stop 2, and the darker green is in stop 1. And then you can rotate around, look right in here. As I rotate this around, the position of the dark green kind of moves around. So, depending upon what you're trying to show, this is kind of nice for showing where shadows, something like that, in a simple way. Okay, so there's some suggestions. When you get it drawn out and you like, and you can just go to these lines and delete them out. I usually wait till the very last to actually delete this vanishing point, because one thing you'll find is that your eye is actually quite sensitive to the direction that these are taking. And if you draw a line that's going along this edge, doesn't line up with that point, then, if you were to just try to draw this by hand, without a vanishing point, your eye's quite sensitive, and you'll find it just doesn't look quite right. if you get rid of this point, need to put a line in, and basically what I try to do is just figure out where that point is so I can use it again. Okay, so that's 3D perspectives. Now, you don't need to do 3D perspectives, you just use cross sections, that's fine. But I just thought it would be helpful to see how to do these drawings. One thing that you might do, if you're more comfortable drawing things by hand, is to draw it by hand and then scan it and bring it in drawing. I think you should try to use computer-based drawing for your conceptual model. You're going to need to be able to get your drawings into the computer somehow. So we just saw this drawing from the high plains, and so you could, if you wanted to have this in, it would take a little bit of time, but it wouldn't take too much time to just go and redraw this thing in. So I guess I would probably just draw in this piece first. And I don't know, seems to be off thinking about something, whether it wants to show my line or not. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. Something courtesy of Bill Gates, I guess. Well, anyway, this is another option, is to go and trace over the drawing that you import, and then what you would do is just get the tracing done. So it was something that you felt, well, so basically get the information off of this drawing, and then you erase it. So that will be one option. I mean, it would be okay, I guess, if you use drawings that were drawn by other people and redraw them. I'm not going to really. I'm not going to be too upset by that, but I would urge to not do that. I would urge you to try to come up with your own original drawing and get it into the computer using kind of software, or perhaps some other ones. That actually, when I draw for papers, I'll use I use CorelDRAW, which is a drawing software that's made for it, and so it does pretty much the same kinds of things that we saw, just gives a little more flexibility. Although PowerPoint is pretty flexible. So I don't really know what's going on with this. It seems to be off doing something, and that's really the extent of what I wanted to talk about. So I think I'll just end it here.